land of philosophy, a place of stories, thoughts, and dreams. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. I have spent a decent deal of time reflecting on the things that I have faced. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times you go to the doctor's office or you find yourself in an emergency room and they ask you what your pain scale is. It's pretty hard to answer because at that moment, what you're experiencing may very well be the most painful thing that you can remember that you have felt. And I tell you what, I've been in the ER many a times, and someone will ask you, well, what's your pain? And you're like, well, it's like an 8 or a 10, and they give you this look like you are a piece of garbage, like there's no way that it could be that painful. Then soon thereafter, you kind of feel like a prejudice against them because, they see people with their limbs have been chopped off, or they step in and their inside parts are hanging out on their outside zone. I feel that a lot of times people, especially in the healthcare community, will lose a level of empathy. They'll have a disconnect because they do see horrific things at different times. And this 10-point scale that they use simply isn't adequate, especially if in your day-to-day life you don't have an idea of what the 10-point scale actually means. Seeing varying degrees of frowny and happy face does not convey the message. If you want to use this effectively, I think that we have to understand how it's supposed to be used before it's time to use it. A part of my personal advocacy campaign is to ensure that you have the ability to critically think, to interpret data, to research, and to communicate effectively with those who are attempting to help us. What better way than to take this pain scale that's so widely used throughout the healthcare community and use it as a means for us to be our own personal advocates. Well, how do we do this, you say? Well, imagine what in your life a pain scale of 1 to 10 would be. Think about the things that would make your life a living hell if you were to experience it. We can look directly just into some of the side effects of chemotherapy. What would be the pain level of nausea, mild nausea? What would it be for medium? What would the pain scale be for nausea that doesn't stop, where you can't eat? What would fatigue be? Mild fatigue. What would be fatigue be if you had a hard time getting up every morning? What would fatigue be if it felt like your muscles were ripping from the bone every time that you moved, where there was a sensation of glue causing your muscles to stick instead of slide across each other whenever you're walking? What would the pain scale be for if you couldn't feel your fingers and toes? How would it be if you couldn't feel your hands and feet, your forearms, your calves, your entire arms, your face, your lips, your tongue? What if this lack of sensation was like one akin more to like an icy hot or cold or fire? What's the pain level if you had a difficult time remembering? Say, for me, it's a hard time remembering just about anything anymore. And that's an idea that's really difficult for you to understand if you've never actually experienced chemo fog. I have forgotten all sorts of things from my childhood, events that have happened in my adult life. It is a bizarre experience, one that is quite torturous. In my journey, the damage caused from chemotherapy has hurt my domestic skills. It has impaired my ability to live, and I have to relearn all of those things. Now, with that mentioned, my oncological team failed me to such degree that there was no mention of any kind of rehabilitation of any sort. There was no mention of me during or afterwards trying to talk to someone to optimize my nutritional intake. So much where I had to fight my oncologist in order to get it. Fight my oncologist in order to get any kind of physical rehabilitation. There was no questions asked in terms of how can they help me with my memory? How can they help me physically? How can they help me re-enter society after this destructive chemical has been introduced into my body? These things are horrendous. And if we want to have an idea of what we're facing or the pain scale, whenever someone asks us, we have to have a means to quantify it in terms that we can get. So perhaps look back in your own life. When you had the flu, think about the different symptoms and signs that you had. How would you quantify nausea? How would you quantify diarrhea? How would you quantify the aches and pains of it? What numbers would you give to the common cold? What would you give it to a sprained ankle? What would you give to a moment when you broke your foot? If you've had surgery, what would you give it the pain of post-surgery? When if you ran out of medicine? What kind of discomfort level would you give painkillers in of itself? That mind-numbing experience, sometimes that sensation or of living where you feel numbed or separated from the rest of the world. What number would you give hallucinations? Let's think about the mental anguish aspects of it. How much anxiety does it create, and how much pain would you apply to that? Nightmares. Does it give you any nightmares? Does it give you any flashbacks? And I know it may sound like a pretty daunting thing. And this is just kind of a rough idea of something that could be beneficial. Get an idea of what your pain scale actually is. Now, where this comes to personal advocacy, another layer to this, the actual pain scale that I'm looking at in terms of my Advocacy for Hope campaign. Whenever you are preparing to enter treatment, ask yourself what number of pain you're willing to endure and for how long. Now, with chemotherapy, there's a possibility that some of the symptoms that you experience as a side effect may be permanent. And there's no saying what will and what won't be permanent. It's kind of a coin toss. So with that said, you need to decide the maximum amount of pain you're willing to experience in order to live. By having an idea of what the pain scale actually means to you, you will be able to determine whether or not the treatment is the best choice for your situation. Remember, you need to know where you draw the line in the sand. And the more tools you have available to you to draw that line in the sand, the better able you will be to stand up for it. This is your life. Only you know the quality of life that you want to live. And I want to help you discover all the tools that you can to discover it and enforce it. This is only one idea of many. And hopefully today I have given you some new perspectives on how to approach personal advocacy through critical thought. Thank you very much, and I hope that you have a beautiful day.